Tim, my manager, looked at and said, there's a big picture of Paula Abdul there. I bet that's going to cause problems. So he sent an email. It's late in the day. It's like 5:30 in the afternoon. He sent an email to Abdul Legal. And, whoa! I can't tell a story in the air. I get fired. But if you ever find me and I'm drunk, ask me the story, and I'll tell you the whole story of how I ever found the coolest thing ever at the bottom of an email sent back to my group from a lawyer, which was prepared in anticipation of litigation. You ever get an email and at the bottom it says prepared in anticipation of litigation? You got problems. And you should just know that your lawyers are off somewhere doing their $300 an hour job. Because problems, big problems. Well, welcome to Keith Explains again. For me, it's June. For you, I'm assuming it's apocalypse. Given that I'm only 2 shows behind in editing. We've been catching up. Because as I mentioned, we fired our editor and hired a new guy. And the new guy is diligent and he cares. He cares about the show deeply, which is why he edits it so religiously. Every night he's home, slaving in front of his computer, editing the show, trying to think of witty things to say. The old guy, I found this out later, he would just put text like after I said things that like made fun of me underneath me and stuff, which I really should have been following up, but I kind of trusted him. And the new guy will look at the whole show and then he'll write out a script. I mean, first he'll write a transcript and then he'll send it to me and say, I didn't quite hear this word. What were you saying? And that was Wisconsin. And he'll correct it. And then he'll take it back and he focus groups it or something. But he, I guess, and a small team get together to Chili's. And they get a pitcher of big margaritas, and then they read through the whole script, and then they get another pitcher of margaritas, and then they read through it again, and they try to think of funny things to say, and then another pitcher of margaritas, and those chips. I mean, I'm sure they're just eating those little bowls of chips all the time. So even though they're drinking, pitcher after pitcher of probably $14 margaritas, I don't know what they cost at Chili's because they comp me. But they pay, because they're little people. But even given that, they're eating so darn many chips, I'm sure Chili's is losing money on them. But I'm told after 8 or 10 pitchers of margaritas, they have this long, funny script scrawled on napkins that they then take back, and he retypes it in, and he emails it to me for approval with time code, like, at 4 minutes, 14 seconds in, we're going to put this up. And I read through it all, and then I try and remember the show. And then that part never works, because once I said it, it's gone. So mostly, he does all this work, and he sends it to me, and I just go, that's great. Fabulous. I love the show. And then he goes on and edits it. He puts the text up, and sends me screenshots of each place where the text is to make sure it's centered correctly. Again, I don't pay any attention to those, because I got better things to do. And then he edits it, puts it on DVD, uploads it to the internet, brings it down to the station. It's great. I'm totally out of the picture now. Before, I always used to worry about the show. Not that I did anything about it, but I used to worry. Now, I don't need to worry about the show. It's in great hands with this new editor. You people are going to love it when you eventually see it, because that process, I think, is going to take a long time. So trust me, it'll get better. Anyway, I guess the first thing to talk about tonight, and tonight's topic is, it's a potpourri show. I'm just going to talk about whatever, because I don't have any big things to say, and I got a lot of little things to say. And in particular, see this is my stack of notes. We were cleaning out some of the Keith Explains archives at home, trying to find one particular piece of paper with the names of some people on it, so we could put them in the credits, because they helped in a show, and we didn't find the paper. But I did find all of these other pieces of paper. These are all the notes I've made for shows in the past. And they're not all the shows, because a lot of shows I throw the notes away on the way out of the studio, because I think I'm never going to need these again. And I never do, so I'm right. But apparently sometime I take them home and throw them in the Keith Explains box, which is why I'm able to get here tonight with this huge pile of notes from previous shows, which I have skimmed through and culled some things I could talk about. And if I run out of topics for tonight's show, I'm just going to open the big pile of notes at random and talk about what I would have talked about like 2 years ago if I had gotten to that point. So stay. Maybe it'll be a train wreck. You don't know. This could work. First topic for tonight, though. Want to follow up on the Keith Explains Marathon Party. Now we had, we advertised it widely. It was up on the Facebook thing. We said, hey, if you're into Keith Explains, come to the Keith Explains Marathon. Bleh. Keith Explains Marathon, which was at my house and involved lots of alcohol. Even thinking back on it, see, it affected my speech. And we're like a month later. We had it a month ago at my house. We had about 600 people come, which is amazing because you can fit about 15 people in my house. So there was this long line. I had to hire a bouncer for my own house. And some of the people later in the day, when they finally got in, they were like, what is this? And we're like, it's Keith Explains Marathon. They're like, never heard of it. I'm like, why did you come in? They're like, well, there was this line and it looked really exciting, so I just got in it. So, but no, we had, like I said, 600 or so people come, and we had a few very diligent people. We showed all of the Keith Explains ever, all 300 episodes or however many there are. I forget. We're on show 500 something, but we've skipped some, and we only film one a month, and we've done them for 5 years, so simple multiplication would tell me there could be no more than 60 or so, but somehow I think there are 300. So I'm going to stick with that. We showed all of them, one after the other, beginning to end, and there were a few brave souls that watched them all with the big pots of coffee, and by the end, there was nothing left of their poor little minds. But about 2/3 of the way through, when we asked them, they said they were still having fun, so I think it was worth it for them. Keith Explains Marathon. If you hear of the next one, you should come. And you should have heard of it, because I did mention it on the show in April when we taped it, although we haven't edited it yet, so you couldn't possibly have seen it. So when you see the April show, which you will sometime in the future, you missed the party. And then when you see this show after that, when I tell you that you missed coming to the party because we hadn't yet aired the thing that told you to come, you should go, why do I watch this show? Doesn't make any sense at all. He invites us to parties that have already happened, and then he chides us for not coming to parties that he invited us to that had already happened. Okay, something else, WWDC. Work for me is kind of stressful right now. And the reason it's stressful is Apple has this big developers conference every year, Worldwide Developers Conference, hence the title WWDC. It's not held in the District of Columbia. It stands for Developers Conference. It's held in San Francisco, and this is the first year we've had like 5,000 developers signed up. Apple apparently filled up WWDC, which amazes me. I thought we'd filled it up in the past because there are always a lot of people there. But this is the first time we actually got so many people signed up. The fire marshal would come in and go, "You can't bring any more people in." Not a one. And we're like, what if he's short? The fire marshal's like, no. And we're like, what, 2 midgets? Can we trade 1 adult for 2 midgets? And I'm sure the fire marshal would go, no, because they probably have a rule about number of shoes or something. Which as an engineer would just make me go, 1-legged guys. Can we trade 2 1-legged guys for 1 2-legged guy? And then they'd go, no, because the 1-legged guy will be in a wheelchair. And then I'd be like, what if we took 2 1-legged guys and we strapped them together so that they were like one guy? But I see that you can't argue with the fire marshal, is I guess the short thing, which is why Apple can have no more people coming in. But we got a huge number of people coming in. I this year am presenting a session at WWDC, Wednesday afternoon, 2 o'clock. You should come. I mean, you can't, because again, this won't be edited before you see it, number 1. And number 2, WWDC is sold out, so you couldn't buy a ticket to come. And number 3, I've seen the slides for the session, because I wrote them, and it's really not that interesting. That said, man, is it hard to do slides for a session, because you do them, and then you put them up, and you do this sample walk through with people that know what you're doing, and then they have all these comments. You should do this different. You need to change this. You should rearrange things. You have too many words in your slides. Too many words in my slides? They're not full, okay? I got the slides. I started typing at the top of the slide. There was a little bullet before each line. When I got to the bottom of the slides, I was done. They're like, there are too many words there. And I'm like, there can't be too many words there. Why am I allowed to type them if they're not supposed to be there? And they're like, you should have fewer words in your slides. People don't want to be reading your slides when they're in your talk. And I'm like, Yes, they do. I've been in talks before. Sometimes reading and rereading the slides is the only interesting thing you can do. Like, make fewer words. So then I went back and I edited them, and I was like, took all the words out. So like nothing made any sense at all. Like I had, I had a point be like 2 lines long, and they'd go, all your points should be 1 line long. Like, it won't make sense then. They're like, nonetheless, 1 line. So I edited them all, and they're 1 line. Then I do the talk, and then I get comments back like, some of your slide points don't make any sense. And I'm like, I know! You told me it could only be 1 line long. And they're like, well, you should make sense in a line. And I'm like, do you see? What if you're trying to say something that can't possibly fit on a line? And they're like, well, then you shouldn't say it. I'm like, well, then let's not have the talk. I mean, these are complicated things. We need big words. They're like, just use smaller words. I'm like, the smaller words are wrong. But I use smaller words. Like, I refer to files everywhere, even though files is the wrong word, because files is 5 letters long. Whereas file system items, that's like 400 letters long. But that's what the air. Anyway, that's what's stressing me out about WWDC this year. And then I got to give this talk, and I know you're all saying, Keith, you talk in front of people all the time. That's true. I have a TV show. I come out here, I do this. I don't do a lot of preparation for the TV show, as you know. I have to do a lot of presentation of this WWDC thing. And here's the difference. For WWDC, it's important to not be lying to people. To be somewhat correct in what you're saying. And complete and concise. Whereas for my TV show, none of those really matter. In fact, it's better if I'm not concise, because I got 28 and a half minutes, okay? If I go through a topic and I got 17 minutes left in the half hour, it's not like the TV station has something else to run. They got no 17-minute shows laying around to fill that gap, because Keith was able to talk about Iron Man in 12 minutes. So the fact that I can just talk and talk and talk and just say nothing for a minute and a half, that's filler, is what that is. There's no filler in WWDC. It's annoying. And then, so my last big WWDC thing was, I've spoken a couple times over the year, but back in 2000, back when I was macOS 9 technical lead, they said to me, Steve Glass, my boss, came to me and said, Keith, I would like you to give the macOS 9 roadmap at WWDC. And I thought, this is great, because most of the time it's the vice president's given the roadmap. But he thought enough of me, a lowly engineer, to say, Keith, you should give the roadmap. You're the technical guy. You know what's happening with macOS 9. I was like, great! So I went off and I did slides. And did a lot of slides. And then people would say, there are too many words in the slides. And then I'd say, I need the words. And then we made things smaller. And then they said, well, you should move these slides around. And we shouldn't talk about that. And we should try and talk about this. And exact same thing 8 years ago as I'm going through now, except back then it was macOS 9, and now it's something I can't tell you about because it's secret. And boring. Secret and boring. It's secret now. After it's not secret, it will still be boring. Anyway, so back then, I'm giving the macOS 9 talk, and it's Tuesday. It's Wednesday, actually. It's Wednesday of the week. In the morning, and I was like, great. So I was all prepared. I'd been doing my slides. I'm going to practice my speech in front of the mirror like they told me to. Because they sent me to speech school. They're like, you're an engineer. You don't know how to talk in front of a group of people. I'm like, yes, I do. And they're like, no. We've seen you do it. You don't know how to talk in front of a group of people. And then they send me to speech school. They're like, you should connect with your audience. And I'm like, I can't see the audience. There are these bright lights, and they're in the dark. And they're like, you should act like you can see them. And I'm like, why would I do that? And they're like, well, it makes your audience feel better. And I'm like, but don't they know I can't see them? And they're like, no, they don't know that. And I'm like, what if I just told them that up front? What if I just said, by the way, I can't see any of you, so I'm not going to act like I can. And they're like, no, you can't do that. You have to act like you can see them, and you have to point. And gesture appropriately. To connect better with your audience, to fill them in on macOS 9. And I thought, great, I will point. And I will gesture, and I will act like I can see them, and I'll look around at different parts of the audience, which I can't see. There could have been no one out there, and I would have been looking around. Okay, so anyway, I was doing the macOS 9 talk. And it's Monday in the afternoon. and I get a call from a friend of mine. He said, "Did you see the keynote?" And I'm like, "No, I'm going to watch it on TV later." And he's like, "Steve killed 9." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, Steve Jobs came out and said 9 was dead." And I'm like, "I work at 9." I'm like, "Yeah, Steve came out and killed it." I'm like, "You're joking. You're funning with me." He's like, "No, he had a coffin on stage and he played funeral music and he said Mac OS 9 is dead to you. You people should only be working on 10 from now on." And I was like, "I work on 9. I'm in charge of 9. What?" Ah! And then it occurred to me why Steve Glass said, "Hey, you should do the Mac OS 9 roadmap." Steve was a vice president, and Steve knew that Mac OS 9 was a touch of death. So he got someone else to do the Mac OS 9 talk. But anyway, Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was. Wednesday, as I said, Wednesday came, and I went and did my Mac OS 9 talk. And as I said, I had many slides. I had rehearsed it in the mirror. I had practiced. I knew all the words. I tried to point. I pointed poorly. I tried to look at the audience. I couldn't see them at all. So I just relied on listening to them laugh and gasp when I said things to know where they were sitting in this huge room, because the Mac OS 9 Futures of Mac OS 9 talk was in the largest room they have there. Just seats as far as the eye can see when the lights are on and can't see when the lights are off. And I gave my 60-minute talk in 42 minutes. Because apparently when I'm on stage in front of 1,000 people, I talk fast, really fast. I say things really quickly. I look at the slides. I say, you know, we worked on this and this and this, and in the future we're going to be doing this and this and this, and we would like you to remember this and this and this. So 42 minutes into the talk, I reached my last slide, which said Q&A. So I said, "And now we have a little time for Q&A." And then I walked over to the chairs where the Q&A people were sitting. And as I said, the room was brightly lit, so I couldn't really see anyone until I walked over to the chairs and they brought the room lights up. And in the front row were all the people I worked with looking like this. Because again, I had done a 60-minute talk in 42 minutes. And that included like 2 minutes at the beginning when they introduced me. So I had done it like 2/3 the normal time. And then I sat down, and then the marketing person came out and sat down, and then one more person came out and sat down. And then they said, "Are there any questions?" And then there were crickets. Because there were no questions. And I was like, "How'd we do?" And I looked at my watch. Because I didn't have my watch on, but I think I looked at something. I think there was a clock down here. I looked at the clock and realized I had done the 60-minute speech in 42 minutes. And I guess I kind of knew it during the talk because I knew I was talking too fast. And I was trying to slow down, but there was nothing I could do. Because I was in my head and everything was moving very quickly. So finally someone stood up and asked a question, and I answered the question. And then someone else stood up and asked a question, and I answered the question. And then we had 45 minutes of people standing up and asking questions, because the sessions are 75 minutes long, 60 minutes, 10 minutes of Q&A, 5 minutes of get out of the room, someone else is going to talk. We had 45 minutes of Q&A, because I had only used 40. And then afterwards, people came, right after the talk, people come up because they don't want to ask questions or whatever, and they're like, "That was great. You left so much time for questions. We love that." Most sessions, you only have 10 minutes of questions at the end because they do them for an hour. But you left a lot of time. I was able to get my questions answered. I was very, very happy. And I was like, "Well, 9 is dead." And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, I was just talking really fast. It probably should have taken an hour. And they're like, "No, yeah." That's WWDC. That's why I'm stressed this week. Okay, here's why I'm... So like I said, I'm stressed. Now, in spite of the fact that I got all this work to do, I have this other thing I've been doing this for the past 6 months. There's this thing called Santa Clara Leadership that I signed up for. It's this program the city of Santa Clara puts it on. It's designed to help train community leaders and let you learn about how things in the city work and different institutions and meet people and hear from people. Today was the last class. It's been one a month pretty much since January, although I think we had 2 in January. It's been very, very interesting. And it's 25 people in the class, and every one of the class is smart and involved and interested in doing something good in the community and volunteering, and then there's me. I go there and there's the nice librarian person who's reading to children as volunteer. She's a librarian. She's a child librarian. But in her free time, she goes to the library and reads to children. I'm like, aren't you at the library all the time? Why? Fabulous person. Who else is there? There's this woman who's trying to get the swim center rebuilt, and there's the city business person from this city, and there's the guy that runs the park department, and they let me in, and I don't know why. Because I'm sitting there thinking, I'm technically an idiot. And I have, as far as I can tell, almost no socially redeeming value to the city at all. For the most part. Like, I volunteer for a couple things. But, again, you could replace me with a dog that, knew how to push the right button. And maybe things would be, I don't know. Anyway, so we have this class, and like I said, today was a particularly good class. This morning we had this whole section on ethics. Ethics in politics, ethics in communities, how government should be making ethical decisions. And Santa Clara has this huge ethics program, which I kind of peripherally knew about, but the guy that did it is the guy that helped set it up, and he went into it. And it's hundreds of pages long. Like, if you run for office in Santa Clara, they have all this stuff they tell you, like, well, here's what we think ethical behavior is, and we'd like you to behave these ways, and everyone else is going to agree to behave this way if you agree to behave this way, and we do these things to kind of explain what works and what doesn't work, and we've tried to change the rules over time, and it was terribly interesting to be there and listen to this guy talk, because I have an undergraduate degree in philosophy, and my emphasis was ethics. But it was 20 years ago, so as with most college things, I remember the ethical equivalent of, my Latin, which is manus manum lawat. It's one hand washes another. It's the only Latin I can say anymore. And it's what they taught me on the first day in Latin class. So like in philosophy, like ethics, like I remember utilitarianism, greatest good for the greatest number. Immanuel Kant, ethical theory. If meteors get hit the earth tomorrow, you have to run around and kill all the people on death row, otherwise justice isn't done. Kant never made a damn bit of sense to me. Who else? Nietzsche, God is dead. I don't know why he thought God was dead. That's the only thing I remember of Nietzsche anymore. So I have all, because he was explaining things and I was trying to think things, and it brought back some other memories, which is, as you know, I was involved in politics when I was in college as a student politics. So he's describing appropriate ethical behavior. And it occurred to me that in student politics, I was doing the exact opposite of everything he was describing. Almost to a T. Apparently I was very bad in college. Like, this is going to make John happy. John is my floor director, because he's been putting this on my blog forever. Keith, you should talk about the Threek story from college. Keith, you should talk about the Threek story from college. So we're in student politics, and we're the Bob Caston School of Driving. We named our political party after our state senator, who was picked up for driving drunk in Washington, D.C., basically the week our political party was founded. So we thought, this is hilarious. Bob Caston, our state senator, driving drunk. Bob Caston School of Driving, Funny for a week. We as a political party were around for 3 years. So we were constantly explaining to people the year later who Bob Caston was, why he would have a school of driving, and why our logo was a set of skid marks with a martini. Okay? Kids, if you're going to do a joke for your political party name, make it a joke that'll have lasting power. Don't do something short. Anyway, so we were a political party, and we made up our platform. Now, most student politics involves, we don't cut value to the students, don't raise tuition, etc. We had all of that. Kind of. But we also thought it's critically important that you be funny. Really frickin' funny to be elected. And therefore, we promised things like, in the dorms in the southeast part of campus, they had replaced all of the forks with threeks. And threeks are forks with 3 tines. And in this case, 3 freakishly long tines. So that when you were eating your food in the dorm cafeteria with your threek, you were constantly poking the roof of your mouth with these freakishly long 3 tines. Because God did not intend forks to have 3 tines. He intended them to have 4 and then to be a normal length. So we promised, among other things, that we would rid the campus of threeks. Now, we had no idea how to do this. So we're sitting in a meeting one day and we thought, what if we just started taking them? So we did. You'd go down to dinner in the dorms, and when you were ready to put your dishes back in the thing, you would put your threek in your pocket and you'd go back to your room. And after a couple days, we did some math, because we had math majors in our party, and we realized we were never going to steal an appropriate number of forks if we were stealing, 30 of them a day. So we'd go down to the cafeteria, and as you pass the cutlery area, you'd grab kind of a handful of threeks. Put them on your tray, and then when you're done, you'd take your threeks, your handful of threeks, and you'd put everything else back, and you'd take the threeks back to your room. And then we realized threeks just kept coming out, even though we were stealing handfuls of them. So we started stealing the entire baskets of threeks that they put them out in. So we'd go down to the cafeteria, and we'd take the basket, and we'd walk back to the dorm rooms. And we did this for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and apparently eventually we started to make a dent in the available supply of forks. They still had them, so we kept going. And eventually we later learned we had stolen so many forks that they were washing them as fast as they could to put them back out. Now they knew we were stealing them, because we told them. And we were giving all of them to one particular guy, Ralph. Ralph the Barf Monster was his name. We gave everyone nicknames. I mentioned that before. His was Ralph the Barf Monster due to an unfortunate incident one of the first nights that we were involved in student politics and went out drinking on Friday. You'll figure out what Ralph the Barf Monster did after our night of drinking. So we kept them all in Ralph's room. He had a big army, what do you call it? Thing with a box, big box he'd gotten in the army. A kit, chest. A big thing. the subtitle guy will figure out the name. We had essentially filled that with threeks by the time we got a call from the director of food service who said, "We surrender. We'll get rid of the threeks. We'll trade them with someone to get forks back. Just for God's sakes, please bring us back our threeks." So we thought, okay, time to bring back the threeks. This is the point where we realized that a big chest full of threeks is really ungodly heavy. Really, really, really heavy. Like so heavy that even after you've tried to lift it and realized this is too heavy to lift, and you've thought, we'll go get a cart. You can't lift it to put it in the cart. Or if you get one of the tilty dolly things, you can't tilt it. You can't tilt a big thing full of metal. I think I'm out of time. Okay, I got to the threek story, so John should be happy. Next month, we'll talk about something else. See, I had 3 pages of topics for tonight, and I got through one of them. So I'm apparently never going to read you random topics from the past, is all I've got to say. Anyway, have a nice night, everybody. See you next time. Now, where was I? Okay, good. So they're going to cut the audio. So I can keep them on the phone. So Kim, as I said, sent an email off. 5:30 late in the day. He says, we have discovered there's a system allowed. And we're just... And like 15 minutes later,